We lived in a dozen places while I was growing up, and I went to nearly every white public school in Montgomery, and which is why I got here. Where I was born on the Oak Park side of town, right across the street, about a block from Oak Park. That was a very irritating development for me when I was a teenager back in 1959, when the local city government decided rather than integrate the city parks, they would just close them all down, and they filled in the swimming pool at Oak Park with concrete. And if you know where to look, you can go find it still. It's covered, it's a grassy knoll now, like the one in Dallas. But it's a metaphor to me of what people did and the extent to which they did it to avoid integration. And then after a while, suddenly something happened, and then all that kind of drifted away except for attitudes. But the city parks never came back. There are no city parks except to drive through in Montgomery like they were. They were all over town. And I grew up with the city parks, so I really was irritated when they closed them down, particularly for that reason. I was infected with racism, as all of us were, as I grew up in Montgomery. I had a racist father who used the N-word around the house, had a non-racist mother who didn't, and who was a balance to all of that in the life of me and my sister. She, when he used the N-word, would pull my sister and me aside and say, "Don't you ever use that word here or anywhere else." So I was torn early on between these two, the yin and yang of racism. In fact, my view is now that every white person who came through the Jim Crow South is a racist. And you can be one of two types of racist. You can be a racist and keep it going, and I have friends who are doing that. Or you can be a recovering racist, which is what I consider myself to be. I don't think you ever get over it, which is where I have some differences with some of the writers on this subject. I don't think it's possible. It's like having scarlet fever and getting over all the symptoms of scarlet fever as you grow older because of its effect on the heart. It's a nice analogy, I think, for what racism does to people, and you just don't get away from it. You can fight it, you can do all of that all your life, but you still are going to find yourself thinking and occasionally acting in racist ways, no matter your intentions. I began to question Jim Crow rules, which none of us knew. One thing a lot of people don't realize, if you didn't live here during that period, nobody knew what the rules were. You'd think everybody did. There were laws. There's a book on the shelf up here that collects all the laws on race around the country. But nobody really knew what the rules were. I remember being called down by a relative once when I referred to a black woman as a lady. And I was told, no, white women are ladies, black women are women. And I said, well, how's that? I mean, what's the logic of that rule? I don't understand that. And I would ask my mother later. I would never ask my father. And she couldn't explain it any more than I came to understand it. But those were the kinds of things that you just grew up with, and they were absurd. The older I got, the more absurd they got. And I started questioning those kinds of rules when I was about 8 years old. We lived 1 year down in Lowndes County in Burkeville. Lowndes County is still the blackest county in Alabama, as far as I know, and it was then. We lived in Burkeville, right on Highway 80. The marchers in 1965 came by my uncle's store on the way to Montgomery. And we lived right there, right off of Highway 80. And I met and became friends with my first black friend in Burkeville. Every afternoon after our segregated schools let out, we met at my uncle's store and we played. And I never forgot him because his name was Blue Jesus. And I never met another Blue Jesus in my life. I never knew what his given name actually was. And I was very fond of him. One day, while we were playing, a relative of mine down in Burkeville pulled me aside and said, "Jimmy, you're spending too much time with Blue Jesus." And I said, well, he's the only kid my age in the neighborhood. How can I be spending too much time with Blue Jesus? Well, we think, whoever we is, we think that you shouldn't be spending so much time with him. And so Blue Jesus and I went our separate ways. And I never knew his real name, his given name, because if I did, I would have tried to track him down all these years. I wrote a little poem to him in my book to sort of suggest how important he was to my early life. That was my introduction to Jim Crow, and I never forgot it. We moved back to Montgomery, and the questions just began to get increasingly obvious and numbered, from the water fountains to all the rest of the Jim Crow rules, which you learn not because somebody gives you a mimeograph list of the rules, you learn because you experience them.